Hey everyone, welcome to the product strategy call for the 2nd of December 2022. So I think we have a couple of things on the agenda. The first one, as you can probably see on the screen, is the DXgov Guild budget, which is following the restructuring and budget proposals coming out. I think after that we have a presentation from DXvoice and then a discussion going over a couple of topics related to Carrot and Swapper. So just starting with the DXgov Guild budget, this was posted on the forum on Wednesday. So if you want to go and take a look in detail, it's all there. This is probably going over it in less detail, if anything. Just a brief overview for anyone not aware. I think you're all pretty aware by this point. But DXgov was initially built for DXDAO only. We're now basically building for multiple communities and the space in general. DAVI is the product, the flexible UI aimed at providing the best UX for autonomous on-chain DAOs. And the recent restructuring has kind of like highlighted it as a key component of enabling community freedom. So now we have guilds. I think this is pretty standard throughout all of the guilds, but we're using the soulbound guilds in DAVI for this. So this is just going over the initial distribution of rep or non-transferable voting power in that guild. The way we did it for DXgov was just time members had been in DXgov for. So for example, like me, Augusto, and Medusa had all been there since the very start, and then it's basically just decreasing in months people have joined since September of 2021. Pretty standard stuff here. You can't earn above 30%, which is just going to be socially enforced. Each month you earn 1%. You need 2% to submit a proposal. And the plan is to do the monthly rep distributions all in one proposal. Probably that'll fall on me or whoever is leading to just do those all in one, because it'll mean the amount being calculated is equal throughout. So there's not any way of actually gaming it and doing a proposal after everyone else to get more rep. And we'll be deploying to mainnet and Gnosis chain for most operations, and mainnet for ENS deployments of applications. I think this is probably the most important part, aside from the actual numbers in the budget itself. But we set OKRs for DXgov over the next 6 months. I think probably most of you were there for the OKRs that we made at the retreat, so fairly familiar with it. But the idea is that the objective is kind of like this higher level thing that we're aiming towards, and the key results are actual things that we're aiming to hit in this period. So the key results are what we're going to be evaluating at the very end of if it's done or not, and they aim to be very binary questions. They're answerable so that we have better accountability in the squad. So the first one is improving DXDAO's governance system. Very obviously, the main part of this is just basically delivering governance 2.0. It's split up a little bit. We have the implementation along with tests being one key result, and the other being having those contracts sent away for audits. The only reason they're split up is because they're kind of two different processes. One I'll probably be organizing along with Augusto, and the others obviously we need developers working on that side of things. That's fairly simple. All these key results are kind of the very minimum. So obviously we're if we have the ability to do more than this, then that's great. But these are the key results that we're actually hoping to hit in these 6 months. So the next one, supporting multiple governance systems in DAVI. So I highlighted at the start, but one of the key important parts of DAVI is being able to support multiple governance systems. So the first one here is having a governance 1.5 DAO working in DAVI production. It says more than, this is just in case we get to 2.0. In terms of, from DAVI's perspective, there isn't a huge difference between 1.5 and 2.0. I won't go too much into that here, but this is just, basically this is the second governance system we're going to have supported in DAVI And this would allow DXDAO to actually work on Devi once we move to those contracts. And then next up, we have explore, publish, research, and if decided important, begin support for more governance systems in Devi. This is kind of one we can't make goals for specific governance systems because we haven't really done the research or explored the ones we'd want to support next. There's a few sort of coming up, like things like NFTs or like safe guilds that use safe underneath that are probably going to be researched, and then I think it's pretty likely we'll have some of those supported, but since the research wasn't done on what the demand would look like, what the user base for those are like, or even how feasible they are, the key result here is just to publish that and show that we're doing that. So obviously that'll also be done in with the BizDev or DXbiz rather. We need their help there. Next up, we have bring external communities into Devi. This is obviously like a pretty large objective. I think it'll probably stay with us for a long time. And this is really just the start of it in DXgov. We're pretty early to even be able to do this. So right now we have a pretty small target of just onboarding one external community onto Devi. Yeah, obviously 0 to 1 is, I guess it depends how you're looking at it, but it is still a fairly small target. We're being conservative here with that because there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen before we can really go at mass of trying to get external communities in Devi. Other parts of this is kind of like supporting stuff to be able to then in future support more communities, external communities. So we have write and maintain non-technical documentation. Right now we just don't have any, and we're already starting with contributor X, and we'll write out obviously some documentation for ourselves, and that will transition into more general documentation for anyone using Devi or onboarding onto Devi. And then the third key result is having a DAO launcher. In Devi right now, there's the way you launch DAOs is just by running scripts is how we do it, but we'll have an actual UI for launching DAOs, and anyone will be able to do that. But again, a pretty core part of actually bringing on external users. Yeah, next objective, providing the best DAO UX in the space. A very, again, a very like high level objective here, but one that's very important to the core of what Devi is, which is really trying to give the best UX in the specific niche of on-chain autonomous DAOs. So some of these key results are a bit technical. So we have rich contract data, and it's a key part of the UX system in Devi. So we're wanting to upgrade to version 2 of that, which would involve a refactor as well. We also have integrating the social aspect of governance. Currently, that looks like a forum. I think probably by the end of the 6 months, it won't resemble a forum very much. It'll be a lot more tightly integrated. But that's something that's already underway. And the key result here is just having a social aspect in governance. Right now, there isn't one at all. And then the third one, I think maybe we'll try to give some more details on at some point, because we haven't really done this before, but just trying to evaluate the user experience with user surveys. I know there's standardized ways of doing this with UX. Maybe we can have some of the UX guys help us with this, but just trying to answer some questions of like, are we actually providing good user experience in Devi? Because yeah, that stuff's pretty difficult to measure. And then finally, we have supporting the DXDAO ecosystem. This is kind of an overall larger goal, but something that was highlighted is something we want to improve across all the squads, which is like cross-squad communication. So identify, communicate, and work with other development guilds on potential integrations with Devi. The communicate part here is really the key part of that key result, where we're able to look at if we've actually done that. Hopefully, we'll be publishing the possibilities for those integrations, and the next key result is actually having one of those integrations in Devi, and the key result identified as an action in the Davi proposal builder, just because it's the most obvious part where an integration could happen, as well as the easiest way of integrating stuff. And then the next one is Davi should be used by DXDAO contributors almost daily as their main governance interface, which is obviously targeted at replacing DXvote, which now that we're moving over to guilds should be pretty possible to at least have most DXDAO contributors using Davi. And obviously everyone using Davi is very dependent on actual operations moving over to a Davi guild, a Davi DAO for DXDAO itself. So it's not mentioned there as being the only governance interface used. That's everything for the OKRs. And so the longer term vision is mentioned briefly. There's quite a lot of stuff on this and it's not really completely thought out yet, but it's also not a part of this proposal, but it's just identifying that there's work we need to do in this proposal to prepare ourselves for the next budget, which would be actually implementing these longer term visions beyond governance 2.0. So enable community freedom is kind of taking us down a path where it's pretty clear Davi will have a big role. And if we continue down that, then there's a lot of work that needs to be done between DXvoice, DXbiz, and DXgov. So initially that looks like creating wireframes for what the system might look like, a bit of a scope, and then looking at the feasibility of that, and if it's an option we want to take. So there was a little bit mentioned in the proposal under responsibilities that it's the responsibility of DXgov to work with the other squads in order to make sure we're in the position after 6 months to actually take us into the long-term vision of Davi. So I think that's everything here. The rest was just running through the budget. I don't think it's, I don't know if everyone wants to look through a spreadsheet for too long, so I guess I'll go over it very briefly. But compensation, the main changes are 2 additional developers, 1 smart contract developer to help deliver 2.0 on time, and the other a front-end Davi dev, just to speed up. I think we're at the point where we can efficiently use another developer resource on the front end. Those are levels 6 and 5, 100% Davi dev, yeah. And then other costs, these are, so there's the event stipend, which is pretty standard, and it was calculated per the proposal, which was put up previously. We have an audit, we put dollars in there that's going off of an estimate for a kind of partial audit from Omega, since they've already been auditing the system bit by bit, as well as another audit by another firm that Augusto's talking to. So yeah, 50,000 for the governance 2.0 audit. We don't have any other planned smart contracts to audit in that time. Then a bunch of regular stuff, RPC, server costs, data hosting, which is Pinata, Fathom. We're going to use Sentry for a QA environment for a bit better debugging. This is one I explained a bit in the proposal itself under notes of the budget, but recently we used an outside team, Parallax, to work on the Orbis social integration for the discussions component. So this is kind of just a way of us using that. 10,000 is a fairly small amount, but it's more aimed at anywhere we can more efficiently use that money. So like Parallax, basically, we're very familiar with the Orbis system, and so it's more cost effective to use them to implement that than to have our developers do it for a couple of weeks. We also quite want to experiment with bounties here. There's a lot of stuff that just won't be prioritized, but it's very cool and could potentially lead us down some interesting paths with the product, or just give benefits to Davi in general. And so putting small bounties on those was a thought we might explore with this budget. Contributor level ups we put as a contingency as well. They're calculated roughly. And I think after talking with Chris, I think this is the best way of describing contributor level ups as a contingency cost. And so they would still be posted on the DAO Talk forum post, DAO Talk forum as a post just to get general like comments before the money was requested for that. And then QA was included in here because there was a bit of confusion about how we're doing QA as a cost. So this could move into contributor compensation if it makes more sense in there. Yeah, that's in here for now. Yeah, any questions? Oh, I saw a question from Venki. Did the OKRs have stretch goals or these milestones? They don't have stretch goals. The way I was viewing at least the key result part of it was more as like the minimum amount of deliverables will be evaluated against. I guess we could put stretch goals, but I guess that makes more sense if we have like a reward system in place, I guess. I could list out stretch goals, but I think putting those, making it very clear that these are like the minimum amounts and not confusing those with stretch goals is probably important for now.
Okay, I think for OKRs, okay, from what I know, when you give key results, I think they should be like measurable, and then they should have like a progress so that you'll be able to measure. Like if it is binary, then it's probably not a very good key result. But this is just in terms of English. Yeah, let's. I mean, if you can you open one of the key results where you mentioned? Yeah, just go through some and then I can. Yeah, like for instance, conduct user surveys. Just say that, yeah, conduct 3 user surveys. Then it is measurable. Then you have put in a goal where, or a key result that says that you are conducting 3 user surveys, and then if you have done one, then you have achieved like 33% of your key result. Yeah, if it's not measurable, then yeah, it's not a very good key result to have. But I'm happy that I see OKRs, so it is good in that way.
Yeah, I think some of them work as, yeah, I guess we can add some measurable parts to some of these. I think a lot of them are very new, and so it makes it difficult to put measurable results on those. Like, is there a difference between doing one user survey and doing 10? Probably if we're doing one, we're doing 10 anyways. But I'm sure we could add them. The other thing is like for like deliverables that are features, I think it's difficult to put like this can't have a number really. This stuff as well can't have numbers. It is binary. What I was meaning by binary was less of like, is this done? Is this? Oh yeah, I guess like even if it has a number on it, it's binary because you can answer if that has been done, and that's what should matter. I guess was how I was looking at them. But it'd be interesting to see if we can put more numbers on these.
Okay, like for instance, if you're releasing something, or if you're going to, yeah, now it goes into OKR discussion in general, right? I mean, this is not specific to DXgov or DAVI, where if you're, let's say, if you mention release a DAO launcher UI, and that's a milestone, you don't have to put this as a OKR. It's not a key result in that aspect. But then if you say that, okay, release a DAO launcher UI and then onboard like 5 different DAOs to use, then that's the key result. Do you understand? Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, let's start with this. I also feel that 6 objectives are way too much. You should only have like a primary objective and a secondary objective. That's it. That kind of gets a squad or a guild in focus to release this. So for 6 months, I mean, you usually have like 2 or 3 objectives over a period of 2 years, and then you split that across into different quarters. But then having 6 objectives for 6 months, I feel like it's a lot. That's why I kind of feel like some of these are milestones and not necessarily have to be like OKRs. What is BSF?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I dare say it's something we'll probably learn over time. Because this is the first time. So it's the first time I've done OKRs or even like setting stuff in general.
Yeah, cool.
I'm sure we'll probably find out the best way of writing these and have more structure to them, maybe after a couple of iterations.
Yeah, yeah. And also about stretch goals. Yeah, when you have OKRs, it is to push the products forward. So you should not connect this with any reward scheme. I mean, rewards are based upon milestones and what you complete, what has been the goal for tech, what has been the goals for biz growth and all those. But then if you set OKRs, it is supposed to constantly push the product forward. Yeah, like in terms of adoption, traction. So you always make sure that when you set your key results, you should struggle to achieve 60% of the key result. So there is always this kind of stretch goals.
Just mindful of time because I know we have to switch to a couple other things. Ross, I noticed that this is an increase in the spend from DXgov over last year. I think kind of most of most of the things I think are showing decreases. So maybe there's kind of like an explanation for that. I think obviously maybe shifting resources, but maybe where does that difference between the spend in 2022 on DXgov and the spend going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So the only major places we increase spend, so this is all just as it was previously, and then we're adding the additional dev on the smart contract side, which is like very specifically for governance 2.0 to make sure we can deliver that on time and as fast as possible. And then the additional dev, I think is it's marked as a contingency cost. So I don't know if it's something we'll get immediately, but I think there's enough stuff for us to be doing that we can then deliver it faster with that essentially. Yeah, I guess like justifying additional spend is difficult without some of the other parts of the restructuring being complete. For example, like a priorities board would make it pretty clear if an increase in spending is justified. I guess like audit costs, for example, have gone down. I guess they're difficult to quantify. But we spent a lot on audits last year. This is going down slightly. Yeah, I think that's where the majority of the additional spend is coming from. It's from these two developers.
Got it. And just something for others too, when we had calculated the expenses prior to this, there was typically around 5% of a contributor's time that was allocated to governance. And so that's one of the reasons why the operations guild one is below, because those expenses are no longer being geared towards the governance squad. And so like here, you can see like Ross and everyone here at 100%. If they were at like 95%, that would be like, I don't know, $2,000 or $3,000 like a month that was not counted in 2022, but would be in 2023 just because of how we're doing it differently through guilds. So anyway, that's just kind of an accounting clarification.
Yeah, I guess it'll be easier to see once we continue doing this because it'll be a lot more standardized where the money's like very clear where the money's coming from and going.
Yeah,
and comparing like this budget to the next one will be very clear.
Yeah, and you always run this into like whenever you're boiling anything down to numbers and categories, you have to like put context around it because it doesn't capture, the underlying reality perfectly. It's just important to know, the context and where they come from so you can do some basic comparisons.
Nice. Any other questions? If not, I guess we can move on to Keenan's presentation.
I think Keenan needed a little bit more time allocated. Thank you, Ross. That was great, by the way. Keenan needed a little bit more time for his presentation. So if Zach, you wanted to go first, and then we can give.
Yeah, sure, we can do that. Yeah, maybe talking a little bit about Carrot and the future. Because me, Benki, and Frederica has been talking about a trade basically where we help each other. And Benki is helping Carrot with the budget. And I think I told Benki at least my opinion on it. I think it's not wise to maybe help a squad to do a budget as an like to just help them, and then we go back to Swapper doing Swapper again. And I think it's maybe good for us to have clear people that actually wants to take Carrot further. And yeah, I just want to chat with you guys here what you guys think, and yeah, what is the future of Carrot and who will be leading it. Frederic is down 50% if I'm not misunderstood here. I'm not sure if he committed to go up again in percent, and maybe Venk, if you have anything to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm just wondering. I mean, who will, if Federico will be yeah, available to actually lead the squad and actually have time to focus on Carrot. I'm not too sure. I mean, I can help. I helped with the budget. I also helped doing design reviews, onboarding Diego, and yeah, I was there part of a couple of calls and then prioritizing and so on. But I mean, I just want to know if Carrot has a future for DXgov, and if so, who will drive this? I mean, I don't want to be the person that is driving Carrot, and I don't want to be the person that is like yeah, helping out with Carrot now, and then if we decide to not do any more work on Carrot, I don't want to be the person that was there, and then everything has fallen when I was there. It's how much committed DXgov is in terms of Carrot. Are we looking for, if Federico has gone down 50%, are we looking for other people to actually take this up?
I don't think anyone has this answer, so I think that's why maybe it's good for us to talk about this before we move, but yeah, move forward. And I think we shouldn't force some people to take like ownership if that's not their like expertise. I'm thinking mostly about Federico to be very smart. Maybe I'm not sure. Maybe like it's not his expertise to be like a project manager, product owner. What do we do here? Do we assign one to him, and yeah, what kind of commitment do we have? Yeah, on Carrot.
I guess I'll take a stab. I guess thinking about where we are right now is, and correct me if I'm wrong on all this. So one, there are audited contracts of the V1 Carrot. That audit was done by Sigma Prime. So I feel like we should be pretty confident in the underlying state of those smart contracts. And then there is maybe like some basic thought on a front end for those, or maybe some initial like wireframes or something on those. And then there's also a like I think there is a product history already. I mean, there's probably thousands I'd say probably thousands of users that have already interacted with Carrot, or maybe at least just gotten tokens from Carrot there. So that's kind of built up through there. And so like, I think that is a valuable foundation to have for like any product. Plus it has a great name in ENS domain. So we kind of have all of those there. Obviously Federico is a key, like has been kind of everything in terms of getting it to that point. And I would love to see how we can figure out how to keep him, I don't know, not say just involved, but like how to keep his vision at the forefront if he's going to kind of have a lot of the ability to execute on that. He's kind of got it this far. I understand that it's really hard for like their different skill sets, and even if you want to be able to drive something or have maybe not control over it, but like you have a vision for a product, that doesn't mean that you want to deal with everything else that like kind of entails. And, you know, we are like working for a DAO. And so if you want funding, right, if you want to get paid for things, like ultimately you have to figure out how you can justify those payments and things to the DAO. And that takes like a different skill set. And then also like if you want to bring on more people, that takes a different skill set there. So I understand the things that are needed to be able to like take Carrot more. And I do not want to like push those on Federico. I think that Carrot is in a spot where it's like, I don't know, 80% of the way there in terms of product development costs. Maybe that's like a rough estimate, but like having done all of the existing product development and even some like brand development, I kind of feel like Carrot's go-to-market plan or the cost of Carrot's go-to-market would be much less than really any other product out there, just because there's already so much been done that are on there. So I definitely think it still makes sense for DXDAO to invest resources into bringing the product to market. I don't know how that happens like immediately or where, and I know that this doesn't really answer the question of like who's going to be helping Federico, who would help Federico, who would be like a project manager or something like that. But I guess that's just where I think from DXDAO's perspective. In terms of like what would be needed from, like, I think there is a desire to fund Carrot development from DXDAO, and I think we should be able to like fund that in some way, even if that's not some like fully fleshed out guild that is kind of operating independently on its own. It's just like, what exactly is the thing that is being funding that is being funded there. So like, yeah, I'd be happy to kind of figure out and come up with a doc that would make sure the right people got funding and that we set aside some of the right potential budget to be able to maybe bring on another person to help with this. But I think there's a lot in terms of like, yeah, I guess who's making decisions about the product that I'm not sure who is the best to answer those.
So maybe Venki, while you're doing the budget, what kind of people did you see that we need to like recruit, or is everything in place with the people we have?
I mean, we have the designs, and yeah, Diego and Paulo are working on those designs right now. But I'm not too sure if the designs that they are working on is like the complete V1 scope, or yeah, I'm not too. We need, I think, at the current state, front-enders would be enough. Like maybe a couple of front-enders should be enough for Carrot. But again, it needs a lot of info from Federico.
Okay.
Like he's the key piece of puzzle here, because nobody knows other than him on what this entails.
Okay. So maybe we'll have a call with Federico, check the status, do a temperature check here. What does he need to make this happen? And also from our perspective, if we see that there is a need of someone leading this, not just from like the vision side, but also like manage the project, so it actually gets done. Then we need to, yeah, if it's you or if it's someone else, we need to make sure that it is not just like a short-term thing. It's actually like 6 months forward. Okay, cool. I guess we don't need to take more time. Let Keenan do his next thing. Are you ready, Keenan?
Yeah, for sure. If there's nothing else to hit on here.
No. Let's talk with Federico and see what's up.
Cool. Let me get the stream going here. Cool. Can we see?
Yeah, we can see.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so hey, this is Keenan from DXvoice, of course, for those of you on the recording. I want to take this opportunity to do, it's an opportune time to have a bit more of a casual chat, kind of run through things that we have and haven't done from the DXvoice side, juxtaposed against the current restructuring and kind of how that fits in what we want to see change to kind of operate going forward. So it's a bit of a juggling act between a little bit more serious and a little bit more casual. So we'll kind of go serious, casual, serious. But to kick us off with the agenda, kind of what is DXvoice for anyone not familiar? Why has it been difficult to operate? We'll have an unshipped exhibit. It'll be a bit more fun, kind of highlighting the stuff that we have made and why it wasn't delivered. Namely, like what step of the process has resulted in it not existing today. Current and upcoming initiatives, a lot of what we do is communicated solely with the team that we operate within. So we felt this is a good opportunity to kind of share what is going on, what we have running currently. Of course, this will all be much better highlighted in the budget next week for DXvoice. So keep an eye open for that. And then should DXvoice exist and what needs to change to see that happen? So hopping right into it with what is DXvoice. DXvoice originated as DXdown marketing. It was kind of a blanket term that didn't really have a peer kind of direction, but we've slowly been evolving towards non-technical / service kind of bucket. That includes content, social media design, community retention, moderation, copy text, kind of irking into QA, biz dev, etc. So we provide our services on a running basis. Basically, there isn't a, and I'll get into this next slide, there isn't a very pure delegation of what DXvoice follows. It's kind of which squad comes to us. We respect that as they are being paid by the DAO. Ergo, it's a little bit messy, and I'll get into that in a minute. Priority often determined individually. Has had very little forward-looking interconnectivity and is often approached after a feature is ready to ship, which, again, I'll get a bit more into here in this slide, which is why it's been difficult to operate. Large communication gap and squad communication often missing, as I mentioned in the last slide. Often, and this isn't a finger-pointing game, I think it's very much so on us as much as the squads. But there is little interconnectivity when there is a feature to be made, and instead it happens after the feature is made. That kind of goes into anyone that's had the power to influence the focus. The prioritization, often even to DXvoice, is unclear. So it's difficult to understand what DXvoice can do, what we're taking on, and to an extent, which focus we have to respect, because of course we have a capacity as well. Unclear ownership delegation expectations and high veto rate. Kind of same thing as the last point, but the high veto rate specifically was mainly that when we operated mostly in the open, it was a high veto rate where anything that we did was well, it's a no for me kind of deal. And things really got hitched up and very inefficient in that kind of design. So interconnectivity, starting at the beginning, all steps of non-technical influence are missing in a lot of situations, of course, from product ideation all the way to go-to-market strategy. These are missing, start to finish, basically. And DXDAO's unclear priority has resulted in the high unused content rate. So that'll be the more kind of fun, casual walkthrough here of the unshipped exhibit. All of the things that we've kind of ran through in the last year that has not come out yet as a result of misplaced focus or some other form of hitch in kind of the production process, where it's like, okay, this is good to start, and then it reaches the time where it's time to ship it, and it's something that DXDAO doesn't want to prioritize. So this will be a bit more fun. I have a little bit of a sheet here, but I'll start with one that I think a lot of you have probably already seen if you've been around for a while. This guy right here. I'll have to hop in between different screens here. Hopefully we can see this here, VLC tab. This is the Omen marketing video to be used as a header of the updated Omen branding and landing page, and of course, social media. This was made actually, I believe, a little further than a year ago by the DXvoice squad. And I'll let it speak for itself here. It's just over a minute. Oh shit, no sound.
Let's get some lo-fi beats.
Hold on. Surely there's a way to get sound. Here we go. This should do it. This actually might share you guys. Let's try this. Hopefully this works.
They say the future belongs to those who can see it. So what if you could cut through all the noise and see tomorrow for your decisions today? With prediction markets, you can put your knowledge to the test and tap into a resource that never goes bust, human collective wisdom. And with Omen, you can take that wisdom and turn it into accurate predictions for tangible rewards. Omen is the most secure and flexible prediction market platform out there, enabling completely open and transparent access. Its decentralized peer-to-peer structure makes it easy for anyone to create and/or participate in prediction markets on any topic. Curious about who is likely to win the presidential election or what team will win the World Cup? Got theories about the next big tech breakthrough? Any question can be a market. You get to put your money where your mouth is and stake your crypto on the outcomes by simply participating in this universal quest for truth. It's like peering into the future with the help of community-driven knowledge that turns aggregating relevant information into one big collective human experience. So start making your own odds and get your share of the future with Omen.
So there we have it. We actually shared this in Lisbon, I think, initially. Lovely colors, yeah. I love the theme here. Maybe sharing my screen will work a little better. But that kind of goes naturally into the rest of the Omen branding. Yeah, Dave chose the colors. That was kind of piggybacking off of this a video. So we have, of course, a landing page as well prepared. This includes kind of this portion. And as you scroll down, the arrow that you saw at the beginning of the video kind of naturally moves its way down. A dynamic kind of scroll moves through this kind of process here. And I'll just let it speak for itself. I won't need to necessarily go through every aspect to justify it, but quite love the colors, quite love the what it's trying to say, even with a lot of lorem ipsum. Developer focused, open and transparent, etc., etc. So, of course, the branding side of Omen actually looking very concrete from our end. Of course, this was a lot of our focus, maybe even up to 5-6 months of DXvoice focus. That unfortunately was pushed back due to Omen not becoming a focus under DXDAO anymore and losing some development talent. But this is a good example of an unclear delegation with the Omen team came to DXvoice despite not having a clear resource delegation from the global DXDAO, which resulted in Omen becoming depreciated and then a large, I don't think waste of resources, as I said in the retreat this year. I think there's definitely room for Omen with minimal, I put in air quotes, capacity to kind of to have this new launch of Omen. I think that would actually be a very interesting and relatively small thing to develop. But there is a lot of content and branding all completely ready for Omen from our end. So that's a fun thing that we went through the Omen video. I think there's more here. Quickly, while I'm on this page, we have the Omen mascot, which is another Omen-related initiative. I think actually originally started by Caden some time ago. So this kind of goes through everything here. We had a whole bunch of different ideation rounds. I kept the best of them, the ones that were loved the most. We think the next step for the mascot will likely be if there's any room for Davi to use it, that might be a fun situation. There's lots of very similarities between Davi Cat. Yeah, everyone loved the Bat Cat apparently. So we did some testing on what it would look like in the landing page and whatnot. Also a moth. We were playing around with the moth, but I think the cat was just the winner. Yes, another Omen related thing. Another thing I wanted to run through, I'm not going to run through all of these actually, I'm just going to run through this here. But DXstyle went through a branding process with, I think kind of spearheaded by Zet and myself with Entrecasa. We went through a whole bunch of ideation rounds on what DXstyl's branding could look like and could be evolved to. This is going to be a rougher look here. I'm not going to go through every presentation as it would take a lot of time here. But some of the kind of color palettes and schemes that we went through, yeah, PDSD. This one was actually quite interesting to me. I think this is the very first one we kind of ideated. This idea of like a group hugging while also having like a nomenclature between forks was interesting. Forking was effectively decided that was not necessarily the look that we wanted to have at the time. Post-design stress. Yeah, circle jerk was another ideation. But there was kind of some drafty landing pages and what this kind of looked like in practice for each of these logos and brand faces, which was interesting. There actually are animations, but I won't be able to run them without going through the whole thing. This was an interesting one as well. Kind of ran through, was it like late 80s, early 90s style techno look, which I thought was cool, but definitely not a good brand for DXstyle in my eyes. And this was kind of an ideation of the forks or the circle jerk, as that has said. And then this is another kind of look at the old style technological feel. I actually quite like this one. Having the X, I think, makes it. So that was the first round. And then we went through 5 rounds, mainly, and I won't talk too deeply about the processes here, but the way that this was handled basically allowed, this is the veto process that I was talking about, where DXstyle should be trusting its marketing design team as it's on payroll to make decisions for marketing and design. And when we had run through this process, it was very, very open, and it allowed for instead of us coming out with a strong pitch, taking a swing at the bat here for Chris in the audience. Instead, it was like, okay, these are all the options, and then it's muddied by everyone saying, I like this, I don't like this, and then vetoing certain choices. Which of course is maybe good in the DAO, but definitely need to be presented differently to actually see execution in my eyes. So this is another interesting one, keeping like a social element of DAOs as kind of the focus logo. So actually this is like D backwards A O if you actually really analyze it, but it kind of looks like chat bubbly, like conversation. Again, I actually quite like this one. I don't know if it's a fit for DXstyle. But it is very interesting branding, maybe even for like a product or something. We could reuse this later. Spartan helmet, yeah. And then we had a kind of evolution of the current logo, which I do think is a large upgrade in my eyes. The main thing and concern at the time, the reason we didn't go with it, was actually because the dark highlights that really make this logo, they don't necessarily stand out when the logo is minimized. So like this is a good example. If you look at this, it becomes a bit muddied, a bit difficult to tell, especially on a darker background. You can see it does look a little bit different, kind of outward facing. So we ended up not choosing this one either, which leads us to V3. This is kind of more of a exploration of a couple of different facets. This is the kind of DAO thing, made the D a little bit more clear. Again, quite like this one. We have a different interpretation of the kind of DAO social logo. This one actually almost won. I still really like this, and we could have pushed for it. The main problem with this is that it was very close to DAO House. Very, very close to DAO House, which was especially more problematic at the time as we had a relationship with them. Not that we don't now, but we were actively communicating. So we kind of played with that a bit, and then there was this X one, which I think was a miss, which leads us to round 4. Kind of going through some more interesting DAO Social 1 and Davi. Yeah, we could definitely use it as like a logo somewhere. I think there's a lot of good stuff here, even if it isn't necessarily a good fit for the DAO. So you have this kind of wavy, abstracty logo. Very pretty. I don't think it fits the DAO necessarily. I do like looking at it from like a top-down view. It almost feels like you could pattern it. In fact, I'm sure you can pattern it if you maybe not quite, but it's a very good look. I quite like this one as well. Just not a good fit for the DAO. This one screamed like medium to me. I don't think this was kind of a miss for me. This one was the closest to a win. We quite like this in practice, and there's, of course, I've been missing these landing pages, but the idea of this kind of like star, this grand beacon of like what we're trying to accomplish, juxtaposed against a D, was super interesting. Yeah, until the dirty minds ruin it. I think the reason that why didn't we do these? Basically, because the process was so open, there was a lot of vetoing, and the strong options that were identified that we wanted to move forward with had vocal dissupport, especially from higher rep holders. Too many cooks for sure, and the higher rep holders particularly indicating that they would not support such a proposal definitely made it so we couldn't execute the process, I would say. We did a little bit more exploration on this, which I'll show next. This is kind of like a card look. I thought it was interesting. I quite like the font. Yeah, I do think they all look like amazing. And what I'm trying to get out of this is that DXvoice wants to take another stab at DXgov branding, especially now that we're going through this whole restructuring, refocus, changing our actual vision, which we didn't have before, which should make it a lot more clear to focus on this. This will not be in the next 6 months, though. This will be the preceding 6 months, and or kind of something that's explored in the latter half. But I'll get into that in the budget discussion next week. And then there's this one, which I thought was kind of cute, but it's very similar to Psy, if you are familiar with Psy. And then one last one was just another exploration, the kind of DAO House-esque logo. Unfortunately, still very DAO Housey, even when flipped sideways. And I think it's a little bit too smooth, maybe. Something about this is off to me. Which leads us to the last round, which was a deep exploration of this kind of beacon star logo. We quite like the font. We quite like the logo. As Zet said, eventually it was ruined, air quote, because someone had identified that this looks like an anus, if you will, from the back. I do not necessarily agree with this still today. But it was enough to push the process back after the last round, unfortunately. But this is kind of what the look was like. I was very excited for this look. I think this look is quite fantastic. Maybe the logo isn't there yet, and maybe that's because of the anus or because of the fact that the design isn't necessarily, it's not an asshole. Open for everyone, yeah. That was the big funny bit at the time. But yeah, I quite like this look. I like the kind of beacon shining star feel, but I think that might be affected slightly by the new kind of vision ideation today that we're working through, and if that's going to be, enabling community freedom, or like what can DXDAO kind of indicate and communicate directly through its branding. So we played around with this a bit. I quite like these kind of like about us logos types styles. Everything looks super nice to me. Kind of an indication of how it would look like in branding, etc. Yeah, just playing around here, different typefaces, different ways of trying to minimize the asshole look. But I think that in the end, it was kind of pushed back against, and you can see about 1 million different renditions of what this kind of page could look like, different colors, different fonts, borders, colors even. But I think the main problem kind of resided with the logo and the process that got us here. Yeah, we did play around a little bit with these too. Yeah, so that's that process. And just to reiterate, branding is something that we are very passionate about and want to focus on in this coming year. Sometime within 2023, we'd like to have a delivered brand scope that is updated, that everyone can agree on, is kind of our goal for the year. I don't think that necessarily fits into the first half, but we'll chat more about that next week on our own budget. Also we have here Aqua, of course. Aqua going through a little bit of a branding process, but Aqua's eventually took a back seat to some other initiatives and had some of its own problems in the form specifically. So there does exist some branding, a larger brand palette as well. I think Boris went through a lot of this, but unfortunately this is a backseat currently. I think there is still room for Aqua as a brand, and or the idea of this token launch platform. Mascot, there's also the Jolt branding, which we are mostly familiar with Jolt now, I'd say, but it has taken, again, a little bit of a backseat, particularly to Carrot, if I understand. which of course Carrot is up next. Hopefully we'll get a little bit excited about that. But we did a little bit of a Jolt pass through as well. So some funky, interesting designs. Of course, the gradient catches my eye. Maybe this is why there's a green dot here, but I really quite like these like text faces font styles. Definitely super interesting exploration here as well. So expect some form of this to exist in Jolt when Jolt is once again prioritized. And some more basic stuff over here. Cool. I also want to quickly highlight POAPs. This is mostly just saying the situation with the Copenhagen Flames POAP that resulted in a negative connotation with DXDAO at POAP had resulted in some POAPs not being delivered. The fun ones I wanted to actually highlight is the animated Denver ones. We actually never got to hand out because they were being very sparing with their communication. It was not a very great situation. And actually quite embarrassing, but I won't get too deep into that. But wanted to highlight that this does exist. I quite like this POAP. Maybe we need to do a retroactive mint of it or something to contributors that were there or people that we know were attending, because I do quite love the animation here. Yeah, and that also kind of went downstream to the 3 years in governance. We actually couldn't deploy that POAP, and they were not responsive to us in messages. And that's, of course, the Copenhagen Flames. And then one last kind of look at a couple different things here. There was some product marketing videos kind of put through by the Initiative DAO, I believe mainly put through by Nathan. I think the main problem with that initiative was that although it's Initiative DAO, it wasn't necessarily closely communicated with the Swapper squad in this particular case, and or the DXvoice squad for kind of guiding what that content should look like. I do think the videos have legs in some capacity, but they're not necessarily the kind of branding that we want to have entirely. I'm just going to mute it and kind of go through kind of what it looks like. I do quite enjoy the style, just not necessarily as a formalized release by Swapper was the. Oh, sorry, I thought I read the Zet's last comment here. In the end, something else was the asshole. But I thought that was related to this video. Yeah, so mostly information-based approach to kind of explaining what Swapper is, what it does, why it's important. Which this is kind of like an important initiative, right? Like this is something that we've wanted to do for some time. And the main problem and the reason it had a hitch was because it wasn't quite to the standard of the Swapper team, didn't hit all the pieces that Swapper wanted it to hit. And in the end was determined that it particularly shouldn't come from the Swapper voice. But it does look professional enough that it shouldn't come from the community. Otherwise, it will just be coming from the Swapper voice. So this still exists. We still have access to this. It's still very relevant. It uses a lot of the assets that we currently have. So maybe an avenue with the Swapper team for having some information. I think he's got to bounce, but maybe we can have this live somewhere or run through it and see if we can make any changes or anything. And that also exists for the DXgov side of things.
Good morning.
Very, very informational again. Has some quite interesting visualization, but goes through. Have to drop. Well, we do have a recording, so you can catch up if you want to. Great nostalgia, yeah. And this kind of goes through everything, the way DXgov governance operated, the way it does operate, what DXvote is doing. This is kind of a bit further back in the last year. And yeah, just another representation of content that was created and didn't have the chance to go out. I think actually this was hitched. I didn't see this until much later. It was definitely a surprise. But I think this hitched solely from a focus change and because the Swapper initiative wasn't necessarily one that went through properly. Yeah, I think it is an interesting look. I just think maybe it doesn't necessarily make sense, but it is also something that we have in our repertoire there. So yeah, that kind of goes through the main bulk of the kind of unshipped buckets. A lot of stuff that went through, had some challenges and didn't see the light of day, but it is tools that we still have access to. You know, I figure if we do a branding pass, there's a lot of interesting ideas in here that we can utilize to kind of create something that everyone will be happy with. And vice versa, if we want to relaunch Omen, you know, we have a lot of content and everything basically prepared to, you know, if the Omen like development side of thing was ready next week, I think we could reasonably work within the time frame from the content side. So there's a lot of like very good and useful content here. which kind of brings me back to what we're working on now. I'll try to keep this brief, but this is a nice, interesting look into what we're doing right now, particularly on the kind of branding content side. So Carrot branding landing. This is the arguably most exciting one. I hear the Carrot discussions this morning as well. But this is a fully functional wireframe of the Carrot landing page. Everything works as expected, has interesting animations. Everything, I mean, it really just speaks for itself, to be honest. A little bit of lorem ipsum and placeholder images. But everything is functional and ready to deploy basically once Carrot v1 is ready. So we'll probably need a passer. This has been a little bit of time in the oven, and Carrot is obviously seeing some focus changes. But this exists now and is basically ready to function, minus some adding and subtracting, of course, namely like setting up Carrot in the numbers, etc. Excuse me. Yeah, so trusted. We have actually we have a Luigi quote here as the first quote for the social proof section. Of course, some placeholders, but everything is operable and I think looks fantastic. And this, of course, leads into the Carrot branding. I'm not sure. Maybe I need to pull it up, but this is kind of the social element of the branding. I'm not sure, Dirk, maybe if you want to pull up the other section, I might have access to it actually. But basically, this is a look into the kind of Carrot branding from a social standpoint, how we would communicate it through like banners, how we communicate it through other forms of social media. Of course, right here we have like what Twitter could look like from mobile, from desktop, etc. The branding is largely revolving around this kind of strong statement, Carrot, focusing on the kind of pushing forward. Need to check one sec. I'm also not sure if you want to kind of speak to anything on the branding side of things, Mr. Dirk, as you've been a strong spearhead for this process.
Yeah, I mean, I think Carrot branding is was my first job on while I was joining DXDAO, and yeah, still working on it. Still working on the video, for example. Still working on content. Yeah, it was a while ago that I think the interesting thing is the Carrot branding was done very kind of fast. I think I wanted to have like a different approach than most tech stuff. I wanted to be more graphical, have somewhat I don't know, energy, and yeah, I think what you're just showing are some explorations. Yeah, from Boris. Yeah, some just testing out some stuff. I think the most close thing that resembles the vision of Carrot is the landing page. So far, we did a lot of explorations for other stuff, even for swag, some random, I don't know, Carrot sliders and so on and so on. Yeah, I think.
As a quick aside, I am following your mouse on the screen right now.
Beautiful. Yeah. Again, like I'm not sure if we want to go through everything. I think that would just take too much time. But I think, yeah, Carrot is really dynamic. It's sort of aggressive. I think it makes sense for some product that is new to the market, that's fairly aggressive and needs to find its place, and it's a little bit louder and different than everything else. Same goes for the video. That's kind of a text logo. That's kind of a image mark that can be associated with it. Yeah, what else? A lot of stuff we've done. Yeah, some nice colors in addition to the base colors, graphics. I think one day we need to have these Carrot sliders. Yeah, I think we can go through.
Dave is asking, how did you come up with using orange as color?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it just came to my mind, you know. I woke up one morning and I thought like orange would be a good color for carrot. No, I mean this. We need my basic motivation to still push forward on the carrot branding is to have these sliders on my feed one day. Yeah. I think I went through this presentation like I think at least 2 times in my time at DXdow, and I'm happy to make this stuff happen one day. Yeah, also like a mascot,
Love the carrot guy.
Yeah. One day we'll have him. Yeah, and what I'm working on now in terms of carrot is the carrot video, maybe as the next piece to show. It's in a very, very rough state. It's a 3D animation that has an again interesting aesthetic. Is
Reaching goals can be
just to quickly mention, like the again, like to give some context on the state. It's very rough. It's this is kind of a first animation rundown we got from the animation agency. The voice you just hear is the animator itself speaking. We are working with a professional voice actor to give that 100% professional touch. The video is in black and white just to have a feeling for the animation. It will be super trippy, techy, and colorful, of course. It is it should be a kind of an emotional video that explains a little bit of carrot, how it works, what are kind of the unique business propositions, and should also spark interest and not go into too many details, and should be not kind of explanatory or be a tutorial. Yeah, again, what you see is still very, very rough, and just gives you a hint of what we get at the end of the day. It will be living in the carrot start page really on the top. It can be used for social media, or maybe since hence the aesthetic, also used for NFTs we might give out or something. Again, like the aesthetic is fairly aggressive, fairly experimental. Everything is done in 3D and will be, trippy and interesting, and not your typical boring tech product video. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've taken the liberty of muting it, namely because of the placeholder sounds right now. But that's a super early look. Very exciting stuff from the carrot side. A lot moving along really well, I'd say. I thought your chair was the standing ovation. Yeah, there's also the page here. Feel free to take a peek. Now this is the tester page, so if you notice anything wrong, out of place, feel free to let us know. Carrot sweater, yeah. Anything carrot branded looks quite beautiful to me. Something you've seen earlier in this call actually is a little bit on the Davi branding and kind of the process that we used to get here. Dirk, I will kind of sift through some of these things just because I don't want you to have to talk through every decision-making process, but kind of working through this kind of futurist yet traditional style elements for the DAO. Like emotional, what does a DAO look like? I scrolled a little bit too far left. Here we go. This is kind of the first mock-up of what Davi could look like. Of course, a lot of placeholder imagery, but this idea of these kind of like modal switches that kind of go down to what they're saying. Very interesting look here. This falls down into like social media. This is a very early, the more updated ones coming in over here, which are a little bit more streamlined. Seeing Dirk in the chat. A lot of lorem ipsum. I think we have, the microsite that we put out for DevCon. This exists now, which is, of course, using some interesting black box and color shapes. Just for those watching the recording, Dave has asked Dirk to design his Tinder page, which he has indicated would be useless. Yeah, just use a picture of Dirk. Yeah, so this is kind of some intermediate stage branding for Davi, running through everything, microsite, etc. Interesting moods over here. Of course, as you can see, the gradient didn't win, even though I fought for it. Do quite love this design, especially the existing microsite. Oh, recording does show the chat. Huh. There you go. Another quick thing, and understanding that we've gone a little bit far here, so I'm going to sift through the last little bit and then finish the last bit of the presentation. But Swapper Expeditions is a new initiative that has been coming out. That is the first kind of collaboration directly in product with DXvoice and product, of course, Swapper in this case. So basically having these modals for doing tasks within Swapper to collect a balance. These were initially called fragments. They're probably going to change in the front end going forward as we change the way that receiving them works. But basically, you collect these fragments and they act as a kind of achievement system that allows you to receive certain NFTs, some of which have actual changes to the UI of Swapper, which is interesting. So kind of having, and this is a bit of a spoiler, but I think everyone here is welcome to see these spoilers. Anyone that is deep enough into product strategy call, an hour and 15 minutes in, can probably take a look. Basically having these story element NFTs on the left. These are primarily just visual design and used to tell a story. And following after each story is a vision. These visions are designed in such a way that they have striking kind of abstract visuals. So of course, this one being Visions of Scourge has a little bit of a description, and it would actually allow you to affect your profile banner directly in Swapper. This isn't final, this is just a placeholder. But it allows you to kind of have actual customization of your UI for participating in the event. Eventually, this will go to the Swapbox as well. At least is our interest, having custom designs, animations surrounding your Swapbox, depending on if you participate in events. Definitely interesting. So of course, story, and then a vision will have some nice greenery themes and kind of life themes for this one. Story and then vision have some nice aquatic-y, life-esque themes here as well. Some nice dark blue tones. Story and then vision, and I think this one might change actually. We have an alternative to this one. And then for the vision, of course, is stronger, aggressive, kind of red, evil style that will surround your profile. And then a kind of final stretch tiers here, because it's the most difficult to reach. We'll have a nice gold bordering around your profile and a story NFT as well. So that's the beta launch. This is a 5-week process that will launch around the Odyssey. So this will launch in tandem, and we'll have in the UI, like complete the Odyssey event to collect your NFT directly from the Arbitrum team, and also our own kind of expeditions. And yeah, kind of the first marketing-esque collaboration directly with product. Definitely super, super excited for this. And then I'll quickly talk about these three just because we're running out of time here. These are 3 things that we're kind of working on in the background. Permanent swag is an idea. Basically, the idea of having swag for conferences instead of created per conference, have a global kind of swag, tattoos as well, if you'd like. You have a global kind of swag initiative where you have swag printed seasonally. So that's either 3 months, 6 months. And that has a certain amount allocated directly to the events. So say there's only going to be 200 editions of the shirt within the first half of 2023. And half of that is allocated to events. So half of those you could find directly from interacting with us. The other half that you could get minted directly to your wallet, kind of more globally and digitally, and getting more access to our swag that seems to be loved so much as of recently. So that's that plan. We have the flagship wireframes. This is for the flagship product that has been discussed and kind of passed on chain. Wanting to explore the idea and make sure it makes sense, is operable, can be pitched even to ourselves before we decide to commit to it, was the idea that was discussed at the retreat this year. So that's something that will be in this budget going forward as an initial focus. And then this was just focusing on kind of the socials, operation decentralization, branding, different kind of explorations on swag that I just wanted to highlight quickly, kind of stuff moving through on that end. So yeah, sorry for taking up a lot of time. Only have a couple slides left here. But just for agency's sake here. So this unclear global DXgov priority has resulted in confusing focus of attention. The non-technical services DXvoice provides are important at all steps of product, including incubation, of course, as we've seen with the NIMI folks requiring some things on that side. So DXgov having a baseline of non-technical talent is incredibly important to both the org itself and its product focuses in our eyes. And the reason to exist is supplementing non-technical services, but we've not been able to accomplish this to our standards. So what needs to change is the restructuring implicated a distinction between product and operations. We're suggesting a third bucket, services. The name is not standard. We don't think services is a good name for that bucket, but just for the idea of kind of explaining this, services is what we use. Be provided by DXvoice. So operations ensures everything runs smoothly. Product exists on an individual basis, and services would exist solely to facilitate priorities established by DXgov governance. So this means DXvoice no longer answers the call of individual products, but instead adheres to a priority board voted in by DXgov governance. So this is kind of a quick visualization of how that would look. Yeah, I know, depressing weather icon down here. Realizing my whole page is being shared. This is a bit rough, but the idea is instead of having operations encompass services, operations provide services with budget, governance, contributor X, that kind of style as it would any other bucket. And services provides directly to the products, and this arrow should be the other way, as dictated by DXDAO. So this kind of pipeline goes from DXDAO through to operations, services, products, which results in fees, equity, et cetera, directly to the products that we are incubating. So the idea is to separate that into its own bucket that respects DXDAO's priorities. I have a little representation of that here as well, just what that would look like in the buckets currently, and just examples of each product, of course. But this distinction has one kind of key important factor, and it's that having its own bucket that respects solely the priority of the DAO allows it to live separate from products and execute upon DXDAO's priorities. So instead of the current structure, which is basically anyone can come and indicate that something needs to be done, which is kind of the informal delegation that we were talking about earlier. In this way, it's like, okay, there's a very clear representation of what DXDAO is focusing on and prioritizing. How can DXvoice execute upon it? So structurally, it's not a massive change. In fact, that this could still exist as a separate entity inside operations, but adhering strictly to that priority board is the main thing. So DXvoice needs to have the ability to influence product. This includes operating within consistent deadlines as a aside. So no override initiatives, no more being handed content told to run. Influence should exist from the start to the end of product development. This includes financial viability, marketable features, targets, etc. And if DXvoice does not have the capacity for all of those priorities, particularly the ones that DXDAO has indicated are a priority, it either needs to grow its internal DXDAO squad, which would be the DXvoice squad, or have DXvoice facilitate the onboarding of talent for the most mature products. So say, for example, Swapper is delegated to pushing, say, whatever it is, liquidity.eth as a separation from Swapper. If there requires additional, marketing and or biz dev talents, either we grow the DXvoice squad internally, or we help Swapper as the most mature product onboard its own talent that would work directly under Swapper, as an example. So quickly in conclusion, we're looking to rectify operational inefficiencies, focus closely on global DXDAO prioritization rather than individual basis, a better integration with products throughout their life cycle, including from the start all the way to the finish, tighter communication loop and squad collaboratory structure, of course, working closer with the squads and having a tighter loop of communication outside of those squads is very important and something that we need to do better. And establish those previously misplaced expectations through this kind of prioritization effort. And so we're interested in facilitating the unification of DXDAO services. And of course, I'm not necessarily happy with the name, but it's good for visualization, I think. And looking to create, this is kind of an aside at the end here, and we'll be talking a bit more about next week, but we're looking to create a wireframe for the recently passed flagship kind of product idea. We want to include financial viability, operational technical visualization, and functioning Figma. So anyone can play through it. Of course, it won't be pretty, but it will be functional. And that's kind of the key idea in making sure this is a good idea and something that will run through over the next years. So yeah, that's my bit. Sorry for going well over time. I figured it would be a little bit more, but it was also fun, hopefully. Lots of fun chatter in the chat here. So yeah, much appreciated, and look forward to DXvoice budget early next week. Come on, man. Where's my jitsy claps? Nathan was the jitsy clapper, so. Dave, you're a shit disturber. I think that was Dave. Oh man, now I've blamed Dave for that, Dirk. Oh. The emoji came out of his profile. But yeah, I think that that about wraps it up. I don't think there's any other topics, and we're a bit over. I'm not sure. It's kind of like an informal host of this call. It was kind of Chris, kind of Ross, kind of Melanie. So maybe I'll finish it up with a big thank you for attending, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks. Cheers.
Decentralized call. Take care, guys.